This week's readings are comprised of Genesis chapters 1 and 2, Moses chapters 2 and 3, and Abraham chapters 4 and 5. So if you look at it, we're covering chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on what book you're in and where we're located. And there are a lot of micro topics that would easily take up the 30 minutes that we have here together. For example, we could spend time talking about the creation and its individual pieces, specifically emphasizing that of the creation of man, Adam, and subsequently Eve, the crowning piece of creation. Now, lest you think that I'm slightly biased, President Hinckley in October Conference 2004 stated the following, quote, "Eve became God's final creation, the grand summation of all of the marvelous work that had gone before," close quote. I absolutely love the idea of thinking about God's daughters as the grand summation of all the marvelous work that had gone before. And I encourage you to read that talk from October Conference 2004. It is amazing as it talks about this creative pattern. We also could talk about the first sealing that happened. Adam and Eve were sealed as companions. Now, I love asking people if they remember who their sealer was. I'm going to be very honest. I have to look at my marriage certificate to know the name of my sealer. It wasn't anybody that I knew, except I had worked with him as I had been an ordinance worker there in the Bountiful Temple. But right now, his name 20 years later totally escapes me. Adam and Eve's sealer name never escaped their minds because their sealer was none other than God the Father. Who did your sealing? Heavenly Father. That's who sealed Adam and Eve. We could talk about obedience and how all of the elements that make up the world on which we live were obedient. Some, they had to wait for them to be obedient. And then as God created man, as you look at this account, he states, and they will be very obedient. You and I are supposed to be very obedient to the laws that God has given us. We could talk about our divine identity as sons and daughters of God. We could talk about who actually was involved in that creative process. But rather than do all of those micro teachings, the one that I want to focus on actually has to do with my 7th grade art class. When I was in 7th grade, I was really excited to finally get to take electives. And one of the electives that I signed up for with a lot of hope was art. I had seen some of the art that my older siblings had created, and I actually thought I might have an budding artistic talent. In fact, my sister can freehand draw and write beautifully. Some of my older brothers, their doodles were pretty dang cool, and there was this piece of me that's like, I want to be able to create like they do. Well, I went into my 7th grade art class, and I tried everything I could. I put all of my effort into every single art project. At the end of the semester, the art teacher, who happened to also live in my neighborhood and be a member of my ward, approached me and he said, "Candace, you have a lot of talents, of which art is not one of them. Never sign up for another art class again." I walked out of my 7th grade art class at the end of that semester, devastated. But he wasn't wrong. No matter how I had tried to figure out how to draw perception in a piece of art, it never turned out. My animals looked more like blobs with stick legs coming out of them. But I felt, though, since then, that I really wasn't very creative. Unknowingly, that 7th grade teacher had kind of stifled what creativity looked like, at least for me. And I started to really pour myself into the more tactical courses in place of those that really required much of an artistic ability. You see, the word create, as defined by Oxford Dictionary, is the ability to invent or develop original ideas, especially in art. Now, I'm going to say that again. The word create, defined by Oxford Dictionary, is the ability to invent or develop original ideas, especially in art. What we see in these 6 chapters of this week's study are the 6/7 creative periods. Come with me, if you will, to Moses chapter 2 as we dive into these creative periods. Let's start with verse number 1. And it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Behold, I reveal unto you concerning this heaven and this earth, write the words which I speak. I am the beginning and the end, the Almighty God. By mine only begotten I created these things, yea, in the beginning I created the heaven and the earth upon which thou standest. I love that Jehovah here says, hey, write this down. I'm going to tell you how I made it. There's not a better source than the source to say, hey, this is how I created things. What we get to see here is we get to see God's what? His ability to invent and his original ideas, especially in art. And when I think about the way that the world has been created, God truly is masterful at his art. In my late 20s, I had the opportunity to travel into the heart of Venezuela, which in today's culture would be really scary. But I had the ability to travel into the heart of Venezuela, where I went into the forests of the Amazon and sat at the base of Salto Ángel, or Angel Falls, the world's tallest waterfall. You want to see some amazing artistic ability? Angel Falls, Google it. It is phenomenal. God and his ability to create, awesome. Or how about the sunsets in your local area? There are nights where they are, I am sure, impeccable. Or sunrises, when you get the pink coming up in the early morning. I love it. God's artistic ability is amazing. Now, before we get too far in, please understand that you may see some differences in Abraham from Moses, or you may see some differences in Genesis from Moses. The creative periods, nonetheless, this is how they're broken down here in Moses. So block together verses 2 through 5. And in verses 2 through 5, we get this. Verse 2, and the earth was without form and void, and I caused darkness to come upon the face of the deep, and my spirit moved upon the face. Verse 3, and I God said, let there be light, and there was light. Drop down to 5, the light is the day, the darkness I called night. It's the first day. So in this account, the first day we get what? Oh, we get light, darkness, day, and night. First creative period. And remember we talked about Kolob in the time frame. So how long was the first creative period? Don't know. But God says, call it the what? First day. Is it God's day? Don't know. Is it my day? Poof. If it was, that's a lot of work. Next creative period. Verses 6 through 8. Verses 6 through 8, we get the second creative period. And what does he create? Well, in verse 6, he says, let there be a firmament in the midst of the water. And it was so, even as I spake. Let it divide the waters from the waters, and it was done. What is the firmament? The firmament is like a dome created, or a solid vault against the sky. That's what creates that round piece that you and I see. That's the firmament. So we get what? The heavens and the earth. Block together, creative period number 3, verses 9 through 13. And in verses 9 through 13, he tells us about this piece of creation. Let the waters, verse 9, under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and it was so. And I, God, said, let there be dry land, and it was so. So waters and land separate. This, in my mind, makes me often think of the concept of Pangea. Was it just one big land mass? Because if you look at the continents, they do kind of fit together like a really cool puzzle. And we do read in Doctrine and Covenants about Pangea, but that's a topic for another day. So we have water, we have land, and then what happens? Well, in verse 11, he says, bring forth grass, herb, fruit trees, yielding fruit after its kind, and the trees of every manner. So what do we get in creative period number 3 here in Moses? We get water and land separated. We get dry land, grass, trees, plants. Day 3. Day 4 in Moses chapter 2 begins in verse 14, and it ends in verse 19. And there's a piece of me that gets really excited about this part of creation because I want to understand how this works. So I'm really excited to take creating stars, moons, and suns in the millennium. That is the science class I want to sign up for. Mostly because I think I really like the concept of fire. Those who know me well know I love a good fire. So here we have what in verses 14 through 19, where he says, I'm going to give you the seasons and the days for years. Verse 15, let there be lights, and it was so. Verse 16, the greater light was the sun, the lesser light was the moon and the stars. And what does he do? Well, he divides the light from the darkness, and God saw that all things which he made were good. Day 4, what do we have? Sun, moon, stars, seasons, year. And this is where, if we have seasons, year, and days and times, this is where our time calculation would begin to emerge. But was it God's day or our day that this happened? Don't know. 5th creative period, verses 20 through 23. There's not a lot going on in this 5th creative period, but it makes me think it might have been difficult since this had to have its own creative period. Because what do we get? Well, the waters are supposed to bring forth abundantly creatures that have life. And what else are we supposed to get? Fowls of the air. I'm confident there are many water creatures we still haven't discovered because there's even been discoveries within the last couple of years of deep, deep, deep sea creatures that they've been able to pull out that we've never seen before. And when does this happen? Like, you want to see something cool? Look up deep, deep, deep sea creatures. Like those creatures that like have their own little light source or whatever. That's one of my favorite things in Finding Nemo, where they've come in, the fish like, whoop, his light comes on and they get all scared. Like those fish or something else are the ones that can glow and do crazy things in the deep, deep sea. Yeah. God, he's awesome. Or what? The fowls in the air. And he tells them to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the waters. And that's the 5th day. So what do we get day 5? Well, we get fish and fowl. Day 6, verses 24 to 31, the end of the chapter. And what happens here? Well, he tells us, let the earth bring forth living creatures, cattle, creeping things, beasts, and it was so. So all of the animals of the earth are here in the 6th creative period. And then at the end of the 6th creative period, he says, what? Well, we have to have man. Where is man? And so man is created here in the 6th creative period. So creative period 6, cattle, beasts, creeping things, and man. Now, something important to remember. I shared this adage back in season 3, but I want to make sure in season 4 it resurfaces. My dad used to say something to me that will stick with me for my entire life. And that is, he would say, Candace, when you look across the expanse, you get to see God's handiwork. But when you look into the mirror, you are looking at his literal daughter. I wish you could see producer Cam's nodding. She can remember her grandpa saying things like this of, hey, when you're looking at all of the things around you, that's God's handiwork. But when you are looking in the mirror, you're looking at his literal offspring. I testify that that's who we are. We are sons and daughters of a Heavenly Father who loves us. And he is hoping that through our actions, we are exhibiting our love towards him. You see, the key to God's creative power, and part of what makes it so awesome what he's doing, is actually found over in Moses chapter 3 and verse number 7. And I think this is something that we often overlook. Moses 3 verse 7. And I, the Lord God, formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul, the first flesh upon the earth, the first man also. Nevertheless, all things were before created, but spiritually they were created and made according to my word. There's a powerful teaching there at the end of the verse. How did God create things? Spiritually, they were created and then made according to my word. God did not create anything physically unless he had created it spiritually. And one more time. God does not create things physically until he has created it spiritually. which means all of the creations around us truly have a what? A spirit. Kind of reminds me of a song that Pocahontas sings for Disney. But in actuality, there's something to that. I was on my high school basketball team. Now, if you know me well, you know that I am 5'5", so I'm not a pillar of height amongst my siblings who are 6 foot and taller. But because I had those 6 foot tall older brothers, I had a really strong outside shot. However, something that our coach wanted all of us to be very good at was free throws, which let's call it what it is. Free throws should be exactly that. Free points if you're at that line. You should be able to sink it. Well, in the middle of my sophomore year, our coach came with something that at first I thought was super hokey. And that was at the end of one of our practices, she said, okay, now I want everybody to lay down on the gym floor. And we were like, what? But we did. We followed what the coach asked us to do. We laid down on the gym floor and she said, now I want you to visualize yourself throwing 100 free throw shots. And I was like, wait, what? And someone else said, oh, what are you talking about, coach? And she said, close your eyes and visualize yourself doing 100 free throws. Well, then after we did that for a while, and I don't know how everybody else did, but I was trying really hard to, in my mind, shoot 100 free throws. Then she said, now I want you to do it again in the motion with your arms making the motion as you're laying there on the ground and visualize every single one of them going in. Then after we'd done that the second time, we got up and she had us shoot 100 free throws. Now every day we had to record our free throw count that we would do. Shooting 100 free throws was something we did every single day. But something began to happen as we were visualizing our free throws, at least for me as an individual. What happened? As I envisioned myself making 100 free throws, my actual free throw average began to increase. You've heard of people saying, envision yourself. Or we're at the beginning of the year and I've seen many people that I admire putting up their vision boards. There's a really great quote from a gentleman by the name of Napoleon Hill, who was an American author. And he stated, quote, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve, close quote. I'm going to say that one more time. Quote, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve, close quote. So if God creates everything spiritually, which means he envisioned it and then drew out the blueprint and made it, and philosophers in modern day are saying if you can believe and conceive, you can achieve. It makes me ask the question of what am I envisioning my 2026 to be? Now, my 2026 so far has been its own private dumpster fire. You may be saying, hold up, Candace, we're only like 2 weeks in. How can you already have a dumpster fire? Trust me. I have a dumpster fire. We'll get there a little bit here in just a second. But I have an opportunity still inside of my dumpster fire to create a reality. See, one of the things that we also often forget is found in Philippians chapter 4 and in verse 13. Philippians 4:13 reads, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Which poses an important question for you and I to consider. What are we actually trying to create in 2026? Are we taking action to actively create something? Or are we allowing already the year to create its cluster around us? Are you and I actively authoring our year? Are we creating something? Are we envisioning how we want it to be? Or are we allowing it to be created around us? When I was single and living in my own home, I wanted nothing more than a puppy. I love puppies. However, when I was single and I would say that I wanted a puppy, I had a particular friend who every time I would come up with the idea of, I'm going to get a puppy, she would hand me a piece of paper that was the puppy checklist. And she would say, if you can answer yes to all of these questions on this puppy checklist, you are ready to have a puppy. A friend really understood something about my rock and roll lifestyle at the time, how much I wasn't really there, how much care a puppy actually needed. And little did I know that she was trying to help me understand a very eternal principle. I didn't recognize it for what it was. But let me show you what she was trying to help me understand. I don't even know if she recognized that this is what she was trying to help me understand. In Genesis chapter 1, in that creative summary, we find this. Look at verse number 28. Genesis 1:28. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, speaking to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So they're supposed to multiply, replenish, have dominion, subdue it and have dominion. So what does it mean to have dominion? Well, it means to have authority to rule or control. If I have dominion over something, I've been given the authority and I am supposed to rule or control. So let's go back to the dogs. My youngest has a dog and his name is Lunar. And Lunar is the craziest dog. He has FOMO. He can sing. He can jump probably higher than any dog I know. If you are not paying attention, when he greets you, he will jump all the way up and lick your face before you even know that it has happened. You've got to be prepared. He likes to jump through a hoop for hot dogs. He's amazing. He can roll over. He can't sit very still, but he can sit. But one of the things that Lunar has is Lunar has a lot of love. About a week and a half ago, as we picked Lunar up from grooming, the groomer said, we believe he had an allergic reaction. He has a bunch of really big red spots in his groin area. You might want to watch him. Well, my daughter and I, we checked him out and you could see that they were there. And that was on a Friday afternoon. And on Saturday morning, when we woke up, there were more and they were larger. So we took little Lunar into the urgent vet. The vet recommended that we run a series of blood tests. Those blood tests showed that Lunar had nearly depleted all of his platelets. Or in other words, our dog was bleeding internally and potentially about to exit. I'm going to stop the story for a second. Abraham chapter 4. Remember, dominion is to what? Well, it's the authority to rule or control. And in Abraham chapter 4, as we look at this other account of the creative periods, we hear something extremely similar to what was given to Adam and Eve back in Genesis 1. We're in Abraham 4, verse number 28. Abraham 4, verse number 28. And the God said, we will bless them. And the God said, we will cause them to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and to have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. See, along with dominion, we're supposed to subdue. What does subdue mean? To bring something or someone under control or to calm it. If I subdue something, I bring it under control and I calm it. Well, Lunar is that dog that we have to really figure out how to subdue. But with him being ill, we needed even more. The doctors encouraged us to go to the ER. And those of you that own pets understand what I'm about to say when I say that scared me to death because I know how expensive a dog ER can be. And so I asked the question. The question I asked was, what happens if we don't do anything? And the vet said, well, let me call and find out. I need to call a critical care veterinarian. And so she made a phone call. And my 15-year-old looked at me with big eyes as to say, Mom, what's going to happen? And we sat there and we pet Lunar. Little did we know that in those moments we were trying to exercise what the Lord teaches us back in Doctrine and Covenants section 59. See, in Doctrine and Covenants section 59, we build on this idea of subdue and dominion. And we learn this principle, 59 verses 16 through 21. And in Doctrine and Covenants 59 verse 16, we read, "Verily I say that inasmuch as ye do this, the fullness of the earth is yours. The beasts of the field and the fowls of the air and that which climbeth upon the trees and walketh upon the earth. Yea, and the herb and the good things which come of the earth, whether for food or for raiment or for the house or for the barns or for the orchards or for gardens or for vineyards, yea, all things which come of the earth in the season thereof are made for the benefit and the use of man, both to please the eye and to gladden the heart." So why did God make those really crazy deep sea fish? Well, I know they gladden my heart when somebody discovers one and I think, wow, that is super cool. Why did he create all these things? For the use of man, both to please the eye and to gladden the heart. Verse 19, "And for food and for raiment, for taste and for smell, to strengthen the body and to enliven the soul." So all of these things have uses. And then in modern revelation, he teaches this, "And it pleaseth God that he hath given all these things unto man, for unto this end were they made to be used with judgment, not to excess, neither by extortion." So why do some of you have dogs and cats and fishes, ferrets, gerbils, parakeets? Some of you have cows and horses and lambs. I grew up with all of those. And why are they there? Because it pleaseth God that he's given them unto us. And we're to use them, how? Subdue and dominion with judgment, not to excess, neither to extortion. Verse 21. "And in nothing doth man offend God, or against none is his wrath kindled, save those who confess not his hand in all things, and obey not his commandments." You want to get God hot? You want to get him upset? Don't confess his hands in these amazing creations and do not obey his word. And what is his word? Well, we're supposed to subdue, to have dominion, multiply, replenish the earth, find joy in our posterity. He's created these things so what? That they're pleasing to us. So back to Lunar. We waited for that vet to come in and she said, "I've talked to the critical care vet. They're totally briefed. What we're going to do is we're going to try prednisone. We're going to give him that and see if we can combat this. If anything changes, he needs to go immediately to the ER. Well, I paid my hundreds of dollars for the blood tests and the medication. And as we left, I looked at my daughter and I said, "Okay, what do you think we should do?" And we began discussing. And I said, "You need to realize he has a blood disease. We don't know what it is." And she's like, "I know, Mom. I didn't understand half the words that vet said. All I got was either this medication will help him in the next, couple of months, or he's going to die." And I said, that is what she said. One of those two things is really going to happen to our little buddy here. So what do? Well, we continued to discuss and we came up with a plan. We would fast and pray on Fast Sunday for our dog. And we invited members of our family to fast and pray with us for our dog. Now, you may be saying, wait, you really fasted and prayed for your dog? Yeah, we were fasting and praying for our dog. Why? Well, because I understand this responsibility. Doctrine and Covenants, section 104. And in Doctrine and Covenants, section 104, in verses 13 through 18, we learn this. Listen closely. "It's expedient that I, the Lord, should make every man accountable as a steward over earthly blessings, which I have made and prepared for my creatures." Did you just catch what he said? "I, the Lord, should make every man accountable as a steward over earthly blessings, which I have made and prepared for my creatures." I am Lunard's steward. I have to take care of him. Not only do I have to take care of him because I've invited him into our family, but listen to what the Lord says. "I, the Lord, stretched out the heavens and built the earth, my very handiwork and all things therein are mine. And it is my purpose to provide for my saints, for all things are mine. But it must needs be done in mine own way. And behold, this is the way that I, the Lord, have decreed. To provide for my saints, and the poor shall be exalted in that, and the rich will be made low. For the earth is full, and there is enough to spare. Yea, I prepared all things, and have given unto the children of men to be agents unto themselves. Therefore, if any man shall take of the abundance which I have made, and impart not his portion according to the law of my gospel unto the poor and to the needy, he shall with the wicked lift up his eyes in hell, being in torment. Did you catch what he's saying there? That we are agents unto ourselves, and we are going to be what? Accountable for the types of stewards that we were. We are continuing to pray for our dog and give him medicine. We went in for our first checkup, and our platelet counts are increasing, and we continue to pray and do our part. Part of it is trying to figure out how to subdue. The vet literally said, "Can you keep this dog calm?" And we just laughed as we try to subdue him. So what does this have to do with you and I in the creation? Well, friends, we need to be better stewards of all of the creations that God has made for you and I. And one of the way that we do that is we actually study the creation and create as his children. You see, you and I have that ability to create 2026. Elder Bednar calls that agents to act. You and I are agents to act, not to be acted upon. And what does that mean? Well, we need to go and be responsible stewards of the things that God has blessed us with. I testify that everyone listening to this podcast has the ability to create. What does that mean? Do you remember? To create means to have the ability to invent or develop original ideas, especially in art. I have since learned, since 7th grade, that there is the art of being a good friend. There is the art of listening, the art of writing, the art of teaching. Art isn't just about what's drawn on a canvas and hanging in a museum, but rather it's about what is placed on the canvas of your life and my life, on the interactions that we have. May we create as the Master has spiritually in 2026 and take accountability for our stewardships and be agents to act is my hope. Friends, let's go. Create and do. Take care.